Hi, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, gotta be a late night meandering, hasn't it? Even though it's only 9:25 or 9:35 right now. Oh boy, I do get lots of advice for what I should be doing with my life. Strangely enough, most of the advice that I get is from people who are younger than I am, which is not hard, is it? Because in a couple of months, in July the 22nd, I will be 79. So, what's the advice that I'm getting? Well, the advice is that I shouldn't be driving because I might have a stroke or a heart attack. Let me see, what else? I should be slowing down, I shouldn't lift any weights, I shouldn't, I'm guessing I shouldn't breathe too hard, not too much dancing either, especially tap dancing. Now, I get a lot of advice about how I should be. Well, aren't you thinking about what happens when you need hospital attention? A lot of people plan for this, and I know that it's regarded as being sensible, and I know that there are people with existing conditions who are forced one way or another to think about that. I mean, if you're a man who has had I don't know, a multiple bypass, or you've got a pacemaker, or I don't know, all of these things that people have planned in the past, that you've planned that. Now, whatever may or may not be wrong with me right now, I planned it in the past. Now, if you don't agree with this, you know, I respect your opinion, and if you have planned your future life, if you're knocking on around the same age as me, or let's say 65, most of the people that look in on this channel are around the 45, 55, 60, and then possibly 65 and over. Not too many are my age. Now, I did read a very good quote. It said, all of the people who lecture on death are alive. And that's very true, isn't it? So in other words, in some ways, the people who are telling us about getting old are young. People who are telling us about dying are still living. In the end, all of the common sense things tend to come to the fore. I felt very sorry for my mom. I'm ashamed to say now that I was actually an absent son. I wasn't there. I left home when I was 15. I went into the army. I went into the army and I signed on for 6 years, and ended up having to do 8.5 years, because that's the way that they did it. They took you in when you were 15.5, and they got you to sign a 6-year contract, and then they revealed to you, or this is how I remember it anyway, then they revealed to you that, oh, by the way, the 6 years doesn't start until you're 18. But that's all right, isn't it? No, it wasn't. But anyway, I never got out, even though I tried very hard. But that's another video or two. The fact is that you end up with the thought that maybe you know better about living your life than anybody else does. But until you realize that, you will keep going on what I call other people's considerations. I used to go, when I was working at one point, and I was working as a musician, but I was also, during the day, I was renovating my house, remodeling it. heavy stuff like knocking walls down, putting steels up, support steels, beams, and generally working pretty hard in a very physical way. Wheelbarrows, digging, shoveling, lifting, all of that. And then when it got to about 3 o'clock or 2:30, I would quit working on the tools and I'd get a shower, have a little brief rest, and then I'd be off, and I would be working in a top 40 touring band, and we toured up and down the country, sometimes for 6 weeks at a time without a day off. So the people who would have advised me to how to live my life then, strangely enough, have all suffered not too great lives. A few of them have died because they were busy having fun, fun which never really occurred to me. It never occurred to me as being fun, because you always ended up feeling as sick as a dog, and that was the booze. I never really got into the booze. I had a young man's flirtation with the booze. Any young guy that's or any old guy that's watching this will be nodding his head when I say, I used to just love getting as sick as a dog one night, and then the next day talking about it. Oh boy, didn't we get drunk! I mean, I just can't remember what I did last night. I just had such a great time. What did I do, by the way? And then feeling pretty crappy for the rest of that day. Finally, the light went on, and I thought, I'm not going to do this anymore, and I didn't. So after that, my time in a band was a lonely one, because the fact is that drinkers, and I've said this before, drinkers don't like to be watched while they're making complete mess of their lives. When I first went into the band that I toured with for 7 years, I didn't drink, and of course people are watching you and they say, hey, Tel, come on, why don't you come over and have a drink? And at first, quite innocently, I said, well, yeah, I'll come over. And then I'd buy a Coca-Cola, which was probably worse for me than a beer. But anyway, it didn't leave me insensible. So I'd go over there, and then I'd be involved in, well, whose round is it, you know? Well, hold on a minute. Gin and tonic, vodka and what's her name, whiskey and this, and, you know, margarita and Bloody Mary and Coke. And the light went on there as well. So after that, if I was invited, at first it didn't last long, but I would be invited to go for a drink. I would say, well, I'll come over and watch, thinking that was a joke. It's not a joke, because when someone is, as I said, getting drunk, I've got to change the battery pack. If they're getting drunk, they don't want a spectator. I'll be back.
No but?
Got to change the battery. Okay, I'm back. I've got 19 minutes on a nearly spent battery because we didn't charge the spare up. So, no, when people get drunk, they don't want to have somebody watch them. And I found that meant that life could be a little on the solitary side if you felt like you wanted to be in with the guys. But I was planning a life, I felt, which would not need to have a lot of booze. And so I actually began to be quite concerned if I started to like a particular drink. I used to like one that was, you hardened drinkers will laugh at this, but I think it was called Asti Spumante, and I think it was, I think if you saved up it might be 0.5 alcohol content, but I never understood that, the way that they worked that out. So then I started to like that. I thought, no, I can't do this. I can't go for that kind of addiction. I had my own addictions, of course, but as we all do, but that was not one of them. So I don't know. It's difficult to accept that the thoughts that you have today, no matter what age you are forging your future. Now, when you get to my age, the thoughts that you have today are forging a non-existent future if you're thinking that way. So when I get messages, I get emails from people, get messages from people who say, what are you going to do when you start to get old and incapacitated and need to be taken care? Now, can you see the way that that questioning goes? What are you going to do when? So in other words, this is a given. Now, it's not a given for me. It's not a given for me. As I was about to say about my mom worked very, very hard all her life. And I felt sorry for her, that I thought that she should retire. Well, I was wrong, because when she retired, she died. Within a year, she was gone. She enjoyed, if that's the word, she enjoyed a very brief retirement. And then she died. It was her work and a feeling of being useful that kept her alive. And I realized that that was something that I should be learning from. And I do now. And any time that I find myself saying, well, I better do this, because I might pop off tomorrow, don't, and then I admonish myself. I don't do anything like this, smack my own wrist or anything, but I pay attention to where my thoughts are going. Now, I try to gather lessons from wherever I can. Sometimes they come from quite foolish people. Maybe John Lennon's Fool on the Hill should be listened to. But I remember a long time ago, when I was with my son Luke, and we'd moved to California, and we were surviving as best we could. We were sitting outside a supermarket where they used to sell great ice cream. And after school, we'd march down there and we'd get an ice cream, and we'd sit outside on the sidewalk, right by the, in the parking lot. And coming towards us was a panhandler. That's the fancy name that they have in those in America for someone who's going to beg money from you. And the guy saw me sitting with my son having an ice cream, and he came over and said, "Excuse me, sir, do you think you could spare me a few dollars?" A few dollars? And I said, no, I can't do that. And straight away he turned, and there were a couple of other people, not related to each other, coming towards him. He went to the first one, the one closest to him, and he said, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you let me have a few dollars?" And she said no. And he then walked a step to the next one and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, do you think you could let me have a few dollars?" Now, for me, as a non-beggar, I looked at that and thought, I would have, I don't know what the logic would be, but I would be embarrassed to do that. But he wasn't. What did he know that I didn't know? What did he know that any of us don't know that he did know? And what he did know was that life is a numbers game. It's a numbers game for whatever you do. Whatever you try to do is a numbers game. If you try enough times, you will succeed. Now, I always used to say that nothing was impossible. In fact, I'd say nothing's impossible. You can do anything you want, unless, of course, you're a one-legged man who wants to be a ballet dancer. And then one day I was looking through YouTube, and I saw this thing about a ballet dancer with one leg, and I looked at it, and he was doing an incredible dance routine with this ballerina who had only one arm. I know it sounds like a start of a joke, and it's not. He used a crutch and danced the most incredibly beautiful routine with this lovely woman who had lost part of one of her arms. And the cameraman saw that part of this story was not just about these two people who had overcome incredible challenges, but it was about the audience, because they panned onto the audience and people were watching this dance with tears in their eyes. Now, it's up to you to decide why they were crying, but in a way, in a funny kind of way, I think that they were healthily humiliated, if there's such a thing, that they realized that they'd given up on stuff that they should never have given up on. Back to our numbers guy. He had no shame because he was doing his job, and quite possibly he went round the corner, changed his clothes from the shabby outfit that he had on, and climbed into a Ford Ranger, a new one probably. So the numbers game is really what it's all about. If I said to you, pick, well, the famous one is, if God called you on the phone and said, oh, hello, this is God. Yes, of course it is. Now, I've picked you out specially, and anything that you want to do, I will guarantee that you will succeed. Anything. You just choose it. Don't worry about it being impossible. Don't worry about a thing. I'm going to be right here, and I'm going to make sure that you succeed. Now, off you go. And so, what would you do? I always wanted to play the Moravian nose flute professionally. Or I want to be a basketball player, but I'm only 5'5". Apparently there was a guy that did that. Or I want to be a one-legged ballet dancer, or a one-armed ballerina, or I want to be a tone-deaf opera singer. If you knew that God, the Almighty, had guaranteed that you would succeed, you would stop worrying about failure and just concern yourself with succeeding, doing what you had to do and loving it because you knew that you were going to succeed. If I said to you, I guarantee that if you do this thing 7,000 times, just count the number of times. Here, make a phone call. Make a phone call and ask somebody for $1 million. And I guarantee that if you do that 7,000 times, the 7,000th call will bring you $1 million. You would just go, okay, all right, well, how many can I do today? And I'll do 500 today, or number one. Hi, hello, I'm calling. And you would just go through the numbers, and you'd tick them off, and you'd fill a few notebooks, and you would do what had to be done, because, well, you knew that you only had 7,000. And you get on the calculator, you work out, well, if I do if I do 100 or 500 a day, then that will mount up, and then in 2 or 3 weeks I'll have done what I need to do. I'll have done my 7. Hey, I served my 7,000. Give me my $1 million. So it's only the unknowingness that is the one that defeats us, usually, being unknown. And it took me a long time to learn this. In fact, it took me coming to the Philippines, and against all odds, with only a couple of grand, I came with a couple of $1,000, and no way of earning a living, as I thought then, and I was concerned about money. So I understand when people write to me and say, I've only got $1,500, or I've only got, do you think you can do it on $500, you know, and some people call me about, and they've got an astronomical figure. In my mind, a man said he had $100,000 that he could bring with him. That would be his capital, $100,000. An untold of amount of money for me. When I came, I was selling off my stuff for, I don't know, cents on the dollar to get my 2 or 2.5 grand. Right? So if you can divorce yourself from the idea that you're not going to be able to earn money, then all kinds of things will happen. The universe, or God, however you want to look at this, will give you what you want. You're here on a learning trip. You're here on a learning trip to either redeem yourself, to have a lot of fun, to pay your karma. Everybody has a different way of looking at it. To ascend to a higher level of awareness. And all of those things are all valid depending on what you think. And how it's all going to unfold also depends on what you think. And until you get that lesson, until you realize that the things that you think every day, they're like furniture in a room, and your mind is the room. And if you think ugly thoughts, then it will be ugly furniture. Now, why is that important? Because you live in your head. In and around your head is where you live. And if you choose to occupy that space, fill that space with ugly stuff, ugly thoughts, violence, profanity, evil, refusing help to people, doing all of these things, and thinking that there's no payback, then you will have a very ugly house to live in. And Christ talked about the kingdom within. Now, a lot of people have called me up on that kingdom within. That the kingdom within was a certain thing that was to be viewed from the Bible in a certain way. And I accept what you say. That is how you view it. The kingdom within. The ability to do what Christ did. I don't believe that Christ didn't need to be this iconic deity. He said that he could do things, and I've said this before about the man that came to him and said, "Can you save my daughter? Can you come to my house and save my daughter's life? She's dying." And Christ said to him, Do you believe that if I come to your house, your daughter will be saved? That just my coming to your house will be everything that's needed to save your daughter. do you absolutely believe that? And the man said, yes, I know that if you come, her life will be saved. Jesus said, go home. She is saved. And then wasn't there another one where someone touched the hem of his garment? And because they believed totally that just touching the hem of this man's garment, who was performing miracles, she or he would be cured. And apparently they were. Now, the object is not to get onto a preaching thing and go all religious on you. The object is to say that there was a man of incredible ability, right? Son of God for most people. And he did things which he would do for people simply if they had the faith. He was in effect was saying, do you believe that I can do this? And when people said, absolutely, of course, all you have to do is just touch the child. And he would say, your faith will heal the child. I'm paraphrasing that. So the way that you think is really, really important on how your life unfolds. And if you've got it in your mind that at the age of 75 you're going to pop off, I'm hoping that for your sake at this moment that you're not 74. This is a foreigner in the Philippines.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good day, and God bless.
Too late.
Low bat.
Change the battery pack. I'm going to change the battery pack. It's linked off there just as my video was hijacked by my wife. Thanks a lot for looking in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe. Bye for now.